Governor Pritzker, for your continued support and commitment to the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus agenda. I am very new to the caucus, about a month and a half in. So to my colleagues who have championed these initiatives, thank you so much for your leadership and your dedication to real progress. Today is about ensuring economic access, equity, and opportunity for minority communities around the state. We know this legislation is a direct response to the lack of upward mobility for low and middle income families in Illinois. For far too long, families of color have endured the hardships of an economic system designed to hold them back. This pillar of the Black Caucus's agenda gives African Americans a chance to succeed as homeowners, entrepreneurs, and so much more. Through these pillars, we are truly building and rebuilding communities. The well-crafted policies within this bill push against the unfair trends that have kept many people at a disadvantage. We must and will continue our efforts to improve economic mobility and opportunities for minority entrepreneurs. Again, I am so proud of the work that has been done on these issues, and as a caucus, we will continue to advocate for a diverse business community. And now I bring you Governor Pritzker, who was and continues to be a supporter of this pillar throughout this legislative process and beyond. Governor Pritzker.
Thank you, Senator. Well, thank you very much, Senator Turner. Thank you so much. And I want to express my gratitude to you for your leadership and your work on behalf of the people of your district and Illinoisans everywhere. I also want to express my appreciation to the Union Baptist Church and its terrific leader and friend to everyone here, Pastor T. Ray McJunkins. My friends, we have a lot to be thankful for. It is spring, it is getting warmer out, and today I'll sign 4 bills encompassing the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus's economic pillar into law. We still have much more work to do, but hope is in the air today, and I hope that you all feel it too. There are so many people who helped Illinois get to this moment, some of whom we are fortunate to have with us today. And I'll start with our champions in the General Assembly. Senator Chris Belt and the Black Caucus Joint Chair, Sonia Harper, who together sponsored all 4 bills that I'll sign into law. Speaker Chris Welch, President Don Harmon, Leader Kimberly Lightford, without whom not only these bills, but so much of what we hope to accomplish in state government would not be possible. Leader Jackie Collins, who has made the fight for financial equity a defining piece of her legacy in the General Assembly. Leader Carol Ammons and Representative LaToya Greenwood, who have time and again demonstrated their powerful advocacy on behalf of those who have historically been left out and left behind. I'm so proud to stand with the many advocates who have joined us today. Diamond Jackson with Springfield NAACP, Colonel Paul Cantwell, a consumer law expert at Loyola University, Chicago, home of Sister Jean's Loyola Ramblers. Charles Harrell, President, CEO of the Information Technology Architect Corporation, and Billy Ashmeller, here to share her experience with predatory loans. And of course, I want to recognize the extraordinary work of those outside this room who helped to shape these bills, making this day possible. The entire Illinois Legislative Black Caucus, Treasurer Mike Frericks, the Illinois Department of Human Rights and Department of Labor, and the many advocates engaged in the fight for economic justice. It's easy to see the terrible consequences of systemic racism in economic access, in equity, in opportunity, but it's another thing to actually do something about it. Together, these 4 bills mark significant progress in our efforts to close the racial gaps and eliminate barriers that have for too long unfairly held Black and brown Illinoisans back. While there is more work to do, we are a better state for what's in this legislation today. This pillar advances our common vision for equity and inclusion by recognizing and addressing communities that have historically been cut out of the conversation. That means addressing the impact of a criminal record, which shouldn't prevent you from ever getting a job or having a roof over your head. It means looking inward and advancing our equity goals where we have the most immediate opportunity to usher in change, and that's in our state government. Let me pause just for a moment on that. Since I entered the governor's office 2 years ago, I've made it my mission to put people of color in some of the highest positions in state government, with the goal of changing the narrow mindset that has historically pervaded administrations that were mostly monochromatic. Today, I have the most diverse governor's office in Illinois history, and I am very proud that members of my administration worked to support the goals of the Black Caucus and the bill's sponsors. I couldn't be prouder to sign this ILBC pillar into law. This is the first substantial set of changes to our business enterprise program in Illinois history. By improving procurement processes, incentivizing greater diversity in vendor contracts, and creating a new commission on equity and inclusion, we're building a state government that looks like the people that it serves. And that's not just good public policy, it's good for business too. But to be clear, the changes these bills make reach far beyond state government, and some of the speakers here today will testify to that. As just one example, the Predatory Loan Prevention Act will substantially restrict any entity from making usurious loans to consumers in Illinois. With title and payday loans and loan rates that have soared past 100, 200, even 300% interest, this reform offers substantial protections to the low-income communities so often targeted by these predatory changes. That's just one example of the justice this new law will bring to vulnerable communities. And I want to make sure that you all hear from the others who have participated in this pillar's wide range of protections. The leaders behind me are just such the people who have been so involved in this endeavor. So with that, I'm very proud to turn it over to my partner in governance and someone that has worked hard on behalf of the people of Illinois to bring fairness and justice to all, and that's Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Governor Pritzker, for that kind introduction and for your leadership that is centered on lifting up Illinoisans throughout our state, especially those that are too often forgotten. To my friends and former colleagues of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus, your 4 pillars to uproot systemic racism are nothing short of amazing. They are a testament to what's possible in states all throughout the nation. Today, I especially want to acknowledge all of the bill's sponsors for your steadfast determination to fight for real and lasting change for Black and brown communities. To all of the advocates and community leaders, some of which join us today, thank you for paving the way. And to all of the people in communities throughout the state who are just trying to make it, just trying your very best to give your children a better life than you had. Those who, despite the grind, who sometimes feel like you are just spinning your wheels and never getting ahead, we see you. And today's bill signing and the work towards economic equity is in your honor. Today you will hear much about the what in this bill. I'd like to use the few minutes that I've been given to talk about the why. In America, systemic racism was infused into our economy from the very beginning. And too often the amount of money you make, the apartment or house you can afford, whether or not your business stays open depends on your race. Too often the amount of money you can save, the debt that you owe, the type of health care you can afford depends on your race. And while the median net worth of white families in the United States is about $171,000, that is 10 times that of black families and 8 times that of Latinx families. These problems are not new. The issue of inequity has grown over the decades. It is the product of regressive fines and fees which have disproportionately affected residents of communities of color. It is the product of discriminatory and predatory lending practices. It is the product of a lack of access to affordable credit. It's the product of job discrimination and not being promoted despite being hardworking and productive. Many of the stories of why these inequities exist are very Illinois specific. We could talk about racially restrictive covenants in sundown towns and how when blacks migrated from the South, we were confined to neighborhoods like Bronzeville, the community in which I live today. We could talk about redlining and how federal housing loan programs and banks refused to make loans in urban neighborhoods, giving them the color of red, meaning that they were not worthy of investment. Or we could talk about the GI Bill and how black veterans were largely denied the benefits of home ownership. We could talk about many policies and programs that have worn down and harmed so many communities. But today, with Governor Pritzker's signature of the 4 bills making up the economic equity pillar, we are not only talking about solutions, we will be able to implement them. This is just the beginning. The fight for economic justice continues, and there is much work to do. But today is a proud moment. And I look forward to working alongside Governor Pritzker, the members of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus, and all members of the Illinois General Assembly, as well as advocates across the state, to make Illinois a more just and equitable state for us all. It is now my honor to introduce the chair of the Joint Legislative Black Caucus, someone you can always count on to put in the work and fight for the people. She was also my friend and my seatmate in the Illinois House, Chairwoman Sonia Harper.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Stratton, and thank you everyone for being here today. The Illinois Legislative Black Caucus is proud to stand here today along with Governor Pritzker, Lieutenant Governor Stratton, and so many advocates and community leaders to sign our 3rd pillar as part of our agenda to stop systemic racism in Illinois. This pillar was so expansive that it had to be broken down into separate bills worked on diligently by members of the Economic Access, Opportunity, and Equity Committee of the Legislative Black Caucus, along with our co-chair, Senator Beld, and myself. When you think about the economic needs of an entire race of people who have been disenfranchised since the end of slavery, they are massive. This set of provisions that we are signing into law today are a very important step in reversing the detrimental setbacks many of our communities have experienced for far too long. Governor Pritzker is about to sign historic legislation in a law that will help even the playing fields for so many families. And I know that we have so much more work to do, but today is truly an achievement and a definite leap forward in the right direction towards providing economic equity for all of our communities across the state. This new set of laws will help ensure fair wages for Black women, for Black workers on their jobs, help to end wage disparities for Black men, women, and people with records. We are now requiring businesses in Illinois to track and report wage data categorized by race and gender, and penalizing companies a percentage of their profits for not closing wage gaps based on race and gender. Because of this new law, never again should an employer refuse to hire someone based on a criminal conviction if that conviction has nothing to do with the type of job being sought. We've worked so long just to pass this one provision, and we are so happy to the Restoring Rights and Opportunities Coalition of Illinois, the Department of Human Rights, and Representative Maurice West for making this new law come to fruition, helping men and women who have paid their debt to society actually have the opportunity to become self-sufficient and find quality housing. This new law signed today will help address the shortage of lending institutions, making investments in Black communities, and provide opportunities for Black banks and community development financial institutions with new policies from our state treasurer's office. We are protecting working families with monumental legislation which caps predatory payday loan interest rates at 36%. The Payday Loan Protection Act encourages responsible lending in the state through responsible models. This legislation supports robust lending through banks, credit unions, and partnerships with those regulated entities to deliver important, high-quality, under 36% credit to Illinoisans. Concerned about promoting economic growth and recovery in Black communities, we've included the African Descent Citizens Reparations Commission, worked on by Representative Will Davis, so that we can ensure equity, equality, and parity for African American descendants of slavery within this state. The Legislative Black Caucus wants to make sure our Black business owners have the tools they need to succeed and compete in this global marketplace. So we're helping provide more funding for small business innovation research and increase support for business incubators and accelerators. We're making sure the state meets its business enterprise goals and that minorities actually have a fair chance to do business with the state of Illinois by creating the Commission on Equity and Inclusion. This new set of laws will address equity in the retail and agriculture industries. Very much looking forward to the results of 2 disparity studies that will commence after today. The Black Beauty Supply Disparity Study, a measure spearheaded by Representative Debbie Myers-Martin, will address the lack of Black ownership of Black beauty supply manufacturers. As the first Black chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, I am very much looking forward to the disparity study for Black farmers and growers to figure out how we can help Black farmers in Illinois in a meaningful way while boosting our local healthy food production and local economies. The Legislative Black Caucus is deeply concerned with making sure our social equity goals in the cannabis industry are met from here on out, which is why we have created a Cannabis Equity Commission, which will ensure the protection of our social equity programs and applicants from here on out, as well as make sure the proper revenue makes it back to our disproportionately impacted communities that have been most harmed by the failed war on drugs. So many provisions contained in this new law, all meant to uplift our most vulnerable communities. When it comes to many of the challenging and sometimes seemingly hopeless issues that we have in our Black communities, most can be traced back to an economic-related cause. When we solve these economic root causes, we see less violence, hopelessness, and despair in our communities. When these economic root causes that keep us bound are cemented in place by old policies and ways of doing business that are rooted in systemic racism, we have to break those chains. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with this new set of laws today. We're breaking the chains of economic bondage that keeps our communities, businesses, and individuals and families from getting the same fair shot in life that other people get. I would like to thank the host of advocates, constituents, and staff who have helped us get to this day. Let us continue to grow together and grow our communities in the name of economic access, opportunity, and equity. Thank you, and next up, we will have Leader Kimberly Lightford, whose leadership and vision has helped to get us to where we are today. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And help is on its way. And I am so proud of the work of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus and the legacy that we will leave behind for generations to come. and I'm very grateful to be standing in the Union Baptist Church under the leadership of Pastor Johnson. This is where I fellowshipped as a graduate student in the mid-90s, not knowing the direction my life would take, but knowing that I wanted better for myself and for my family. The single subject rule is the reason why there's 4 bills for this pillar opposed to just one. There are so many reasons why Black communities aren't prospering that we couldn't put it all up under one bill, because it impacts so many different parts of policies and procedures that have kept us delayed and pushed back for so many generations, or since the beginning of time or the end of slavery, however you like to position that. But the collaborative effort between the pillars, this in my mind is the absolute beginning. When you're born into poverty, you're just born into a situation that you cannot control, which pushes you into a school system that's based on property taxes with low-income values. It pushes you into an opportunity that your parents face on whether or not their child would attend college or end up in a prison system. And it pushes you to not having quality health care, lack of access from food deserts and things of that nature. It's all based on economics. And today, with this law, we are breaking apart the barriers that prevent our Black communities from having economic access, equity, and opportunity. This is a victory, and an important one. But the fight to create true equality for every single resident of the state of Illinois does not end here. As a Black woman and the mother of a Black daughter, I know how hard it can be for the members of our community to get jobs, to open businesses, to get elected to office, or to take part in other aspects of the economy that white families, many of them well-meaning and not at all personally racist, take for granted. Because of historic redlining and racist policies built into our real estate system, it's been harder for Black families to find affordable, quality housing. This law helps change that. Because Black people, especially Black men, are more likely to be arrested and charged with the crime, it's harder for us to find jobs. This law helps change that. Black men, and especially Black women, still earn less than our peers of any other group. And it's especially wrong when we earn less for doing the exact same job. This law helps change that. Members of the Black community still find it more difficult to start or establish a business. As the decadents of slaves, we don't have access to generational wealth that other families sometimes build on the backs of our own ancestors. For decades, we've been shut out of the best banks, and our communities still has less access to banks than others. This law helps change that. And by the same token, Black-owned businesses still don't have enough access to lucrative state contracts. We knew we needed to strengthen minority contracting requirements in the state's procurement code. And we created a commission on equity and inclusion to oversee the process. This law should help change Black access to state contracts. And for as long as I can remember, our neighborhoods have been full of non-traditional lenders that prey on people who are too poor to get loans from traditional banks. It's ironic, but not at all funny, that the poorer you are, the more you have to pay to access your own money or to get an emergency loan. This law will change that. And I am more than honored for all the help of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus, the help that we received from our staff and all of our stakeholders to make this law possible, and of course, the help of the governor and his administration as we were trying to vet all of this out through basic research and data and best practices, and not from emotion. But it's very difficult to do when you've lived the life. So we are truly thankful, and I am truly grateful. I want us all to work together to make sure every resident of Illinois have access to safe housing, good jobs, and reasonable banking. It's what we all deserve. We're going to keep fighting until we get there. But make no mistake, this law is a major step forward, and all of our communities should celebrate this victory. I have the wonderful task of introducing the co-chair in the Senate of this pillar, none other than Senator Christopher Belt.
Good afternoon. The Economic Access, Equity, and Opportunity pillar, as you've heard, what we commonly refer to as pillar number 3, is really about inclusion and economic justice for all minorities. Pillar 3, as you've heard, is huge in scope, huge. It was designed to address areas of concern relative to the discriminatory, deceptive, and prejudicial practices that are pervasive in our state agencies, as well as companies that do business with our state. This proposed legislation grew out of hard work of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus, work groups, retreats, subject matter hearings, and Black Caucus meetings. This proposal follows up on the phenomenal work of previous General Assemblies and the outstanding work that they've done in trying to eradicate Illinois' systematic and structural practices of racism in the public arena. As a mentor once told me, you cannot expect what you can't inspect. To that end, this legislation is more robust and it includes safeguards within the language to ensure that the language is being followed to the letter of the law. You've heard about the Commission of Equity and Inclusion. You know, my mom used to say to me all the time, she would leave us with me and my brother, she would leave us with our older sister, 11 years older than me, and 9 years older than my brother. And when we wouldn't do anything she wanted us to do. But when my mom got back, we could just see her shadow and we would act right. And then one day when I got older, I would ask her, I would say, Mom, how did you know when you showed back up that we would do the right thing? She said, when the agenda changes, when authority walks in the room. Again, the agenda changes when authority walks in the room. So in order for us to make sure that all these things are being followed the way that they're supposed to be, we created an authority to change the agenda. And so we're happy to know and we're enthused to know that going forward, all these things that we've put in place, they'll be followed. Because at the end of the day, core 3, at its core, pillar 3 is about creating opportunity for each person to create a sufficient material foundation upon which to have a dignified, productive life, to live life more abundantly. To get to this point, there has to be a sincere commitment to inclusion. As the Reverend Jesse Jackson once stated, inclusion is not a matter of political correctness. It's the key to growth. Growth. With the signing of this bill, we have, in essence, afforded everyone a seat at the proverbial table of opportunity. This bill is the linchpin of all and the cornerstone of all the other bills. Case in point, $45 billion capital bill that was signed into law. The current aspirational goals calls for 20%. Pursuant to my math, 20% of 45 billion is 9 billion. That's transformational. That's transformational dollars and wealth for families and to take part in the procurement space. Because here's what we know. If you're doing better, your family does better. If your family does better, that community does better. How? Because you're building in that community. You're spending to businesses that are already in that community. You're creating businesses in that community. So here's the thing. You out of that 9 billion that's set aside money, that 9 billion, those aspirational goals, not mandated, aspirational, then you can start transforming lives, because we know when communities do better, the state does better. We know when communities do better, as Kimberly stated, Leader Leifer stated, educational systems do better, right? And so Illinois is poised to lead the nation again. $15 minimum wage, Illinois, these pillars, Illinois. There's power in one. My mom used to say, and I'll go back to my seat, that there's power in one. Substitute Illinois for one person in a house can change the house, one house on the street can change the street, one street a neighborhood, one neighborhood a city, one city a state, one state a nation. Illinois is poised to do that with the signing of these bills. Thank God for your attention and your time. It is my pleasure to bring up Leader Collins to address the next pillars that she so fervently worked on over the years. Do not get thrown to the side about her size. She's ferocious and she's mean. Come on up, Leader Collins.
Good afternoon. I want to thank Governor Pritzker today for signing Senate Bill 1792. With the signage of this bill, Illinois establishes a gold standard for consumer financial protection. Over the years, the Black community and low-income communities have endured patterns of discrimination in housing, education, healthcare, and economic opportunity and access. There is no better example of systemic racism than that practiced by some in the lending industry. Predatory loans have been responsible for worsening the racial wealth gap. Data show that Black and brown communities are disproportionately trapped by predatory loans. In 2019 in Chicago, a person was 13 times more likely to have a payday loan if they lived in a zip code in Austin, compared to a zip code in Lincoln Park. Payday lending is a high-cost loan product that is built on its ability to churn consumers through a cycle of debt, collecting fees for as long as possible. Fortunately, 17 states and the District of Columbia have made a definitive statement to prohibit high-cost payday loans by adopting interest rates at 36% or less. The Predatory Lending Prevention Act, or PLPA, capping interest rates at 36% APR is long overdue. In 1999, Monsignor John Jack Egan, along with Sister Kathy Prozda, launched a campaign for payday loan reform after a poor woman came to confession at Holy Name Cathedral and spoke tearfully of her experience with payday loans. There were significant reforms to the industry adopted in 2005 and 2010. I want to recognize Majority Leader Kimberly Leifer for her leadership on those reforms. Speaker Welch and Deputy Governor Christian Mitchell, both of whom sponsored 36% rate cap bills in the past, helped bring us to the day where we are today. A 36% rate cap accomplishes several things. First, it strikes the right balance between access to safe and affordable credit on the one hand and protection from predatory lending on the other. Second, it streamlines the confusing hodgepodge of rate caps that currently exist under Illinois law. Consumer loans over $4,000 are already capped at 36%. So the PLPA makes all consumer loans consistent with that figure. Third, a statewide 36% cap extends the same protection that already exists for active duty military under a federal law to Illinois veterans and all other Illinois consumers. You will hear later from Colonel Catwill, who was the drafter of the Military Lending Act, who was very instrumental in helping us put that language in this bill. Given the amount of money at stake, the predatory lenders will not simply give up. Even after the PLPA becomes law, various bills have already been introduced that would add loopholes to the PLPA. And we expect various parts of the predatory loan business to file bills asking for carve-outs, citing unintended consequences. Let me assure you, casting a wide net to stop predatory lending was very much an intended consequence. While we take a moment to celebrate today, we will continue to vigilantly oppose hostile trailer bills, loopholes, and carve-outs. I share this achievement with many, and in closing, the advocates include AARP, the Catholic Conference, Chicago Urban League, Central Illinois Organizing Project, Capital Good Fund, Heartland Alliance, Illinois PIRG, New America, Citizen Action, especially Leader Lightfoot, Senator Christopher Belt, and Representative Sonia Harper, and Speaker Welch, Senator President Don Harmon, and many other colleagues on the other side of the aisle, including Leader McConkey, who supported this legislation. I especially want to thank also State Representative Andrew Chesney of Freeport Republican for being an outstanding champion on this issue. Thank you very much, and I have the honor today to introduce next Senator Robert Peters, who's chair of the Senate Black Caucus.
I'm Senator Robert Peters of the 13th District. I first want to thank the governor for signing this historic piece of legislation. I want to thank Chair Harper for leading us here, as well as Senator Belt and Leader Collins for the work that led us here, as well as the organizers and advocates for making this happen. The Great Recession was absolutely destructive to black working class families. It had wiped out over 50% of black wealth. The current crisis has been a service sector, service-led recession that has hit black women the worst. This pillar is grounded in ending the predatory and racist and sexist practices of draining black wealth for a privileged, mostly white few looking for profits. This pillar is grounded in driving investment to black small business and black workers. This is a historic measure built on ending a systemic gap in wealth and power. I always say, I've been saying for the last year, that this is, three crises: an economic crisis, a public health crisis, and a crisis when it comes to systemic racism. These crises aren't anything new. They come from the fact that for the last 40 years, people have been suffering through pain and hurt. And during moments of different crises, more and more people took advantage of those in that pain. But in this moment and in this crisis, we as a legislative Black Caucus, we as leaders in this state, said that we will act to look out for our people. This impacts everybody in the state, not just Chicago, not just suburban Cook, but everybody. So whether you live in Cairo or Rockford, you are impacted by this historic piece of legislation. And for too long, there have been people who try to divide us up and break us up specifically for whatever they need. But we are united to make sure that as we come out of this crisis, as we come out of this pain, that we look towards each other as neighbors, as community, as family, and we say we are here to help. This is not an individualistic time to pick ourselves up by bootstraps that we don't have, and if we had a little, was taken away decades ago. This is a time for us to pick each other up as one community, as one Illinois. So I am honored to stand here. I am just a partial person on the side. This was led by so many other people. But I'm honored to stand here as we move out of this pain. Because I always say what real safety and justice looks like. I repeat that one more time. Real safety and justice is a roof over your head, food on your table, a good school, a good job, a good community, a sense of family and belonging. That is our path to recovery. And this helps us lead to that recovery. And everyone deserves to have real safety and justice for all, no matter the zip code. So next up is Leader Carol Ammons. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Peters. I am so honored to stand here this afternoon. First and foremost, to the pastor of this beautiful edifice, thank you all for hosting us here today. There is no wonder in my mind why we have this as our pillar signing, this church entering into Lent in just a few days. Recognizing the resurrection and the process of resurrection is important. This pillar is number 3, and I know it seems weird to have a conversation that's religious while we are about to sign a bill. But the reason why this is important is because it is the number 3. And the number 3 represents a significant place in all of our experience of redemption, of equity, and of justice. That's what this pillar represents. And so it is imperative upon us and very, very important for us to frame this appropriately to our governor, who has already signed 2 pillars prior. Those 2 pillars are part of the foundation that every single community needs. Pillar 1, which was criminal justice reform, spurred by the actions of officers who killed so many people in the Black community, that it spurred all of us to significant systemic appearance and action. And the second one is educational reform. Educational reform is how we move communities forward. But we know that we cannot do that if there's no economic resources for those communities to utilize. The wealth gap in this country has grown significant for generations, and some of us act as if we don't see it. When you all report today on this pillar, I am going to implore the media to do something different. Take a moment, look at the provisions, and then do a minute of research as to why they have been included in this package. The predatory lending aspects of this bill are documented and researched by Pew Research Institute, by Yale and Harvard, by the University of Illinois, and so many others, including Loyola, who has looked at predatory lending in this package. And if we want true equity and justice, we got to do a little bit more and report a little bit better on why we are standing here today. As people struggle with the economic fallout of COVID-19, there's a strong, growing sense that the economy wasn't working well even before for communities of color and for poor people throughout this state. A record number of wealth gap growth has happened during this time. Those inequalities are seen more and more everywhere else in the criminal justice system, the economic system, the educational system, and yes, in the healthcare system, which is the 4th pillar. We in the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus put our noses down. We did not rush these bills through. For people who will say, oh, this is unfair, it's unworkable, we can't make it happen, that is false. And if there were remedies that they had, they could have brought them to the table.
We have done what is necessary for this entire state. And every single person, no matter what your station in life, who may have to walk into a title loan place or any other loan cashing facility, will see and feel the remedy of this package and the governor's signature. And we thank them for their patience, because communities have suffered way too long under these unjust policies for us to get to this moment that we're in. So if you want to know why we are doing this, just take a moment and look at the various reports that will stand up with these pillars that are about to be signed, these bills that are going to be signed by the governor in a few minutes. 300% interest on anything is unreasonable and unacceptable. And we are looking economically at the black community, because if we want public safety, then we want equity. And all of us should want the same. So with that, I thank the governor. I want to thank Sonia Harper for her steadfast hard work on this. It has been quite difficult and challenging, but she stuck to it along with Senator Belt and all of our leaders in this caucus, because we took this on as a unit, and with the help of the governor and Lieutenant Governor Stratton, we will implement the provisions of these bills, and we will monitor them and their effectiveness. With that, I thank you, and I have the pleasure of introducing one of the longtime advocates, Ms. Billie Ashmiller. She's a longtime resident of Springfield and a grassroots organizer and leader in the Illinois People's Action. Please welcome her.
Hello. Well, it's been a long time coming. Several legislative attempts have been made. Multitudes of organizations have advocated for this wonderful moment in history. This is a day we're going to celebrate the end of predatory loans in Illinois. So I thank you, Governor Pritzker, for signing this critically important legislation into law. Low-income people like myself, you know, when you're on disability, you don't get a lot of money. Low-income people, we're no longer going to see triple-digit interest rates when we find ourselves, you know, desperate for some, you know, a small loan. You know, it's kind of hard to get a loan when you don't have any credit, because when you have low income, you don't own a lot of things and you don't have a lot of credit. So, but no more triple interest rates in this great land of Lincoln. And I am so honored to represent all those many years of striving. You know, I couldn't even begin to mention all the organizations and actions and prior attempts at legislation. It's been a long time coming, but you know, thank you. It's finally here. It's going to happen today. So, I'm introducing Colonel Paul Cantwell. He is a professor of Loyola University in Chicago School of Law. He's distinguished 25 years of military service and active duty officer in the U.S. Army. He served combat tours in Afghanistan and Persian Gulf. He has received the Defense Medals for Exceptional Civilian Service, Superior Service, Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Star medals, numerous other military awards and decorations. Colonel Cantwell is one of the architects of the Federal Military Lending Act, which establishes a nationwide 36% cap on annual percentage rates, and he could be charged on consumer loans to active duty military. So.
Thank you, ma'am. Governor Pritzker, Madam Lieutenant Governor, elected leaders, public servants, ladies and gentlemen, I am humbled to join you today. I am a proud son of this great state, and I have had the opportunity to serve my country and our communities for a very long time. As you now know from that very kind introduction, I've spent more than half of my life in public service, indeed almost all of my adult life in public service. The last decade I've devoted to stamping out the evils of predatory lending products and services. And it has become a calling, and it is a calling with which I've attempted to use as much zeal as I possibly could, and along the way I've met so many great people. And as we take this next step today, Mr. Governor, we take, and the governor was very kind to point out my beloved Loyola Ramblers and Sister Jean, and I would use the analogy that when the governor signs this bill today, the Predatory Lending Prevention Act, we will go from the field of 64 to the Final Four. Illinois will leave the field of 50, and we will move directly to the national championship. We have been able to secure these protections a few years ago for our active duty service members and their families, but we've not been able to protect everyone else. We've not been able to protect our veterans, our Gold Star families, our Blue Star families, and all Illinois consumers, especially our most vulnerable consumers. We do that today because of the awesome work of hundreds and hundreds of tireless, dedicated people committed to stamping out these sorts of products and these deleterious services. So I stand here before you, a proud native son of Illinois. I stand here before you, someone who served, proud to be a veteran, and I salute you, all of you, for your tireless efforts, for everything that you have done, and on behalf of service members, veterans, Gold Star families, Blue Star families, and indeed all Illinois consumers, I say thank you very much. A job well done. It is now a pleasure to introduce Mr. Charles Harrell. Sir.
Thank you, Colonel Cantwell. Good afternoon. My name is Charles Harrell II, and I am the President and CEO of the IT Architect Corporation, an African-American owned information technology company based in the great city of Chicago for over 17 years. I'm also an engaged and active member of the Chicago Minority Supplier Development Council and the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce. I would like to thank the sponsors of Senate Bill 1608, Senator Chris Belt and Representative Sonia Harper, Leader Lightfoot, and the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus. As a successful Illinois Certified Business Enterprise Program participant and a concerned taxpayer that has attended each and every BEP Council meeting over the past 5 years, I'm excited for the potential that the Senate Bill 1608 holds for small businesses in our great state of Illinois. Aside from increasing diverse vendor participation from the present 20% to 30%, Senate Bill 1608 has the potential to ensure greater enforcement of the BEP rules by being the source of enforcement that state agencies fail to provide. While the state agencies has frequently touted the number of vendors it has awarded certification, it has struggled to meet its obligation to create a fair atmosphere for certified vendors to fairly participate after a contract is awarded. It is my expectation that this bill will improve the compliance efforts of the BEP Council. It is key, however, that our leaders appoint a commission that represents the will of the hardworking people of the state of Illinois. The commission must be made up of individuals that mirror our community and shares its concern with the growth of small businesses in Illinois. With Senate Bill 1608, our great state now has the opportunity to not only certify businesses at a record rate, but to maximize the value of our tax dollars and ensure that a fair playing field exists through the enforcement of participation post-contract award. The signing of Senate Bill 1608 ensures that the core principles of the BEP Act are achieved, which is to grow business revenue, increase capacity, and enhance the credentials of the BEP company in the marketplace. So thank you, Governor Pritzker, for your commitment for creating transformational change for the certified minority business enterprise, the women business enterprise, and companies owned by persons with disabilities. Governor Pritzker, it's my pleasure to welcome you back up to sign these very important bills.
This is a record, 4 at once. Candle. Sign them all at one time. Happy to take questions from members of the media. John?
This type of economic justice, this economic fairness, with eliminating a much more direct program, which would be the blue-collar jobs act.
This is much larger than the Blue Collar Jobs Act. Let's start with the fact that that program, which had a cap of $20 million on it, was something that we passed in 2019. It was part of an ask by the Republican caucus, and we agreed to it and we put it in place. As you know, we've subsequently had a massive pandemic and financial crisis that's hit the state, and so we've had to make do with the challenges of limited resources in the state and the need to balance the budget.
Governor, mass shooting in Colorado this morning. How far are you willing to go in supporting certain gun control measures to see if make this not happen at the state level?
Look, let's start with the fact that I think we all ought to acknowledge the grief that the families in Colorado and in Atlanta have gone through and are going through. And we don't want to experience that here. Unfortunately, we have had mass shootings in Illinois. I very much want to make sure that we're securing our families with proper gun safety legislation. Those are things that the legislature has been working on for some time. There's a lot of discussion that's gone on behind the scenes during my entire term as governor. I think that this will accelerate some of those conversations, and I know those discussions will, I'm hopeful anyway, lead to the proposals that'll come forward and opportunity perhaps for me to sign legislation.
President Biden suggested a assault rifle ban today. I mean, do you support that measure? Do you support going that far in gun control legislation?
I think it's always been the case, and you know that I've been involved in gun safety in the past. It's always been the case that that we ought to limit assault weapons. We have to define them properly, and then limit the ones, particularly ones that are repeating. You know, where you've got bullets that are firing multiples of them in milliseconds or within a second. Those are things that we've got to do away with. Those are, those are for no other use than killing masses of people. Dave.
The Legislative Black Caucus, it seems to me the last 6 months to a year has really come forward and forcefully driven legislation like the four pillars. What's new here? What happened?
Well, I think there's no question that there's been real momentum that's built up. I want to start by saying that many of the leaders that stand behind me today are people who've been driving this for a number of years. I mean, think about Leader Lightford. I mean, she has been at this for, I don't want to say how many years, but let's just say that been a leader, since as far back as any of us can remember. So many others. There, of course, are newer members like Senator Belt, who brought some real momentum to the fore. But there's no doubt that the protest movement of this last summer, that the murder of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor, and so many others, I think has added new life to the need for real change, systemic change in what I think has been a racially unfair, systemically unfair system, not just in Illinois but across the nation.
And if I can build on the gun measure, after Sandy Hook, we haven't changed. Orlando,
yeah.
Baseball diamond, Rodney Davis brings that up once in a while. Las Vegas, I mean, how come none of this has made a change?
Maybe I should ask one of the leaders to come.
Thank you, Governor. I would love to answer that question, because it's been a long 22 years, Governor, that I didn't know what I was fighting. I didn't know that racism was so invisible, but so embedded in all of our practices, and I watched my parents strive, but we couldn't get out. I see black families all the time trying to do better, but the odds are stacked against them because of what you see that we're trying to reverse in this package. And after the George Floyd incident, we have what we call the Joint Caucus, where it's black legislators of all levels of government. And we put together protests, and we fell into the Juneteenth celebration. We did parades, but it just wasn't enough for me. My soul was not settled, and I knew that more had to happen. And I was a chairman of the Black Caucus at that time, and I approached the Black Caucus and said, we have to do more. And I'm grateful that the Black Caucus said, let's do it. The impact that we all feel, that we all live, that all of our families live, has to change. As the legislator in this position of power, we have to figure this out. I didn't know which way to go. I'll be honest, I wasn't exactly sure how to start it, because it's so massive. These four bills is a small fraction of racism against black people. And I didn't know where to begin, but we began by just laying out what the challenges are, what we've all lived, what our parents, what our ancestors lived. And then we began to seek out professional supports from researchers and professors across this country to help us determine how we can best alleviate some of the challenges that we've lived with through policies and procedures. And we built out a four-pillar system. You guys are shocked because you didn't know we could do it. didn't know that we can stay together in unity and work as hard as we did because it was never acknowledged over the years. And so the whole idea of we push, we rush, we pushed it through, it was done in a short period of time is just absolutely not true. A lot of work, a lot of hours spent, a lot of involvement from people all across the state created what you see here today. And I'm so grateful. It just moves me, and that now I understand why I've been so angry at the system. I clearly understand why I leave here every year with billions of dollars of state budget that I vote for, but the impact, we never feel it in our communities. And I'm hoping that this will be an excellent start to turning that dynamic around. Thank you.
I'll keep it brief. Let me just first say, the tragedies that happen, whether it's Boulder, Atlanta, or Park Manor in Chicago, is painful. And I think what's really important here is the fact that we cannot be pitting different and varying degrees of pain and tragedy and trauma against each other. Nobody, no matter where they live, should feel that they have the safety and the dignity that they deserve, whether that's a kid in a school, whether that's someone walking down the street. And so, yes, what happened this summer was a crisis and a tragedy and painful, and it was built off of repeated crises and tragedies and pain over and over again. And we, as a community, as people, stepped up to address this. And I think that when it comes to any crisis, of any pain, of any tragedy, we have to step up and deal with it. Now, what I will say is, oftentimes when there's pain and tragedy, whether it's the Asian American women who were targeted and killed in Atlanta, or black folks who lived in Park Manor, or mostly white folks who live in Boulder, we are told that our crises and our pains are something that has to be pitted against each other, battled against each other. But at the end of the day, what everybody, whether they live in those zip codes and those locations, want is to know that when they go to the store, when they go to a party, when they go to the spa, that they're going to have safety, they're going to be comfortable, and they don't have to worry about someone coming in there with a gun. So yes, this is going to be a big, tough battle. It always is when it comes to gun violence. And oftentimes when we see gun violence and how we address it, we talk about it very differently. When it comes to gun violence on the south side of Chicago, it's talked very differently than an AR-15. But at the end of the day, what we need to know, and I think the challenge for everybody in the media needs to know, is that we need to talk about this as gun violence. A mass shooting in Park Manor and a mass shooting in Boulder is a mass shooting in no matter what. So I just want to make sure that when we have this narrative, that we focus on the fact that these aren't tragedies being pitted against each other, but a crisis that impacts everybody in America. And they may be different crises and they may be in varying degrees, but they are, in fact, a crisis. So thank you.
We have time for two more questions. Two more questions.
Governor.
Yes, sir.
Loretto Hospital has been embroiled in scandal for improperly distributing vaccines. How do you think that these vaccine distributors, that this sort of bad action should be curbed, and should the leadership of that hospital, George Miller and Anash Ahmed, resign because of how they dealt with this crisis?
Well, let me begin by saying that there's only one way that the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois could deal with someone who is administering vaccines and administers them against the rules that we've set out for the administration of them, and that's to restrict vaccine going to that location. There are no other laws that allow, any interception or other activity. Remember that we're talking about safety net hospitals, so there's a purpose for why the city of Chicago allocated a vaccine to Loretto Hospital as it does to the many safety net hospitals in the city of Chicago. And so I don't think the mayor was wrong to make the decision to withhold first dose vaccines. They still have to administer second doses to people who got them at that location. But first dose vaccines, that seems like a completely proper kind of, if you want to say, punishment. Having said that, obviously the management there is worthy of at least reprimand, and the decisions there are being made by the board and of course by the city of Chicago.
Governor, part of this legislation today tries to further the equity goals in the cannabis industry in Illinois.
Yeah.
But we're coming out on 11 months, past that initial May 1st deadline to distribute those 75 equity cannabis licenses. What can you say to the people who are waiting? Because there's lots of folks, I heard some people in this room who consistently say, justice delayed is justice denied. So when...
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that as you recall, the original delay in the issuance of those licenses was due to the pandemic. There then came the challenge of the way the law was written in the first place, which everybody worked on together, was in such a way that licenses could be given, multiple licenses could be given to one lottery participant. And I think everybody saw that and said, why would 21 be able to get 75 licenses? And it certainly was not the intention of anybody that wrote the legislation to have that be the outcome, but that is what the actual legislation yielded. And so in the interests of justice, we're all working on making sure that there is an equitable outcome here, that we actually issue those licenses. There's a bill that's been put forward, several actually, but one in particular by Representative LaShawn Ford that has, a reasonable number of people who've come around to support it, and looks like it has, a good chance. We've been helpful, I think, to the sponsors of that bill and co-sponsors to try to make that legislation better and to push that through. But that's something that the legislature continues to work on.
Passing Representative Ford's bill through would be the precursor to actually then releasing those licenses?
Yeah, I think that there's work to be done still. I think that bill is, has very good provisions in it, but as you know, it hasn't gone through every part of the processes in the legislature yet to reach my desk. So there's still more work being done, but that is one that people have kind of rallied around.
This will be our last question over there. Thank you. This question is for Chairwoman Harper. In regards to all the bills Black Caucus has brought forward, throughout the summer when I followed the hearings, you all mentioned that it's important that we pass these measures, but the state absolutely has to implement them. Too many of your bills previously didn't get implemented. So looking forward to the future now, how can we hold the state accountable to make sure that this happens?
Sure, and thank you for bringing that up. As we did go through our subject matter hearings, a lot of the issues that we're trying to address with the new laws today, we've been trying to address them for years. And so what we're going to do going forward is we have a committee dedicated within our Legislative Black Caucus that is going to be tracking our laws and making sure that they are implemented perfectly so that we can report to the governor's office or those noted agencies when our laws aren't being properly implemented the way that we intended for them to be.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.